I think, look, one of the issues with the dietary supplement space, of course, it's often maligned by the media and even individuals in our profession, obviously, in the medical establishment. But the truth of the matter is there's a very low barrier to entry, right, to get into the dietary supplement space. I mean, essentially, all you need to do is, if you've got the capital and you've got the funding, you can go to a contract manufacturer, of which there are hundreds, of course, in North America alone. And you could just let them know, hey, I want to be able to bring a product to market, a weight loss product to market, for example. And these individuals may not have any training, any background at all in nutritional biochemistry, let alone even health and nutrition or medicine or anything related to the dietary supplement space. And so they can just jump in, dive in, have a label, a product on the market with very little barrier to entry. Of course, there's no approval process per se. And that sets up a scenario where you can have bad actors who come into that space and bring a product to market that may have dubious health benefits, if any, and could actually be harmful. So if they don't understand ingredients, dosing, sourcing, which is huge, and adulteration, which could also be a problem, then you could sort of see where there's a setup for bad scenarios to occur. It could very well be a wonderful formula. It could be a great formula. It could have validated, branded, patented ingredients with safety and efficacy. But again, you lose touch of, you lose that accountability if the individual whose name's obviously on the label has no real input on the design of the formula and doesn't really understand their product. And that leaves that brand open to a lot of potential pitfalls there. And that is just one example of some of the nefarious things that can happen in the industry. But by and large, I think the majority of players in the space are trying to do the right thing, and their heart's in the right place. Of course, there's the old adage, right? The road to hell is paved in good intent, right? With good intentions. I would say there are some opportunities to look for certain seals on the label. That you also need to be careful there as well, because some seals can just be, you can make up a seal and have it on the label, of course. But others are important. We actually, for example, at our regulatory compliance company, developed a seal called Nutravigilance Verified. And so that lets you know that at least someone is watching the cookie jar who's a third party, not an owner in the company, but of course a physician-directed third party who's looking out for pre- and post-market safety. You could also look for other seals that are involved with third-party testing as well, independent testing, to make sure that what's on the label is actually what's in the bottle. The practice of proprietary blends, that tends to happen. Now, here's the thing with proprietary blends. If the intention of the proprietary blend is not to fairy dust or sprinkle in small doses of well-reputed, I guess, premium ingredients, then there would be nothing wrong with proprietary blending if that's really what it's doing, is protecting someone's intellectual property. However, that creates an opportunity for someone to do it for the wrong reasons. So they may have an ingredient proprietary blend that has 4 ingredients, and 2 or 3 or 4 of the ingredients are very low cost, very low quality, and maybe there's one ingredient that's a cost driver. So they can prop blend it in order to reduce the overall cost of their product and increase their margins, still selling the product at a standard retail price. So that's definitely something to look for. It doesn't mean 100% of proprietary blends are utilizing this practice, but I think by and large, there are very few reasons to have a proprietary blend these days, because for example, we have multiple ingredients on the market that we've commercialized that are ingredients that we license to the industry, so the whole industry can use it, but they can use the trademark version, which is patent protected, and that's the ingredient that has also been through the rigors of safety testing and human clinical trials, and hence you can make substantiation based on that branded proprietary ingredient, but it can be fully disclosed on the label. And so I think that's something to look for. Telltale sign, or something else that's a tool that your consumers can look for, is understand that by law, all ingredients have to be listed in order of weight predominance. So even if it's a nutrition facts panel and not a dietary supplement that would list out the individual ingredients, like a food, for example, a protein product or a protein fiber macronutrient-based product, they can also make sure that that the order of ingredients listed matches what they're looking for. If they're buying a product because they want a high-quality protein, then you better make sure that that protein is first or second on that list. Right? But I think it's important for consumers to work with someone who's knowledgeable in the space and understands the dietary supplement space, and someone that consumers can trust. Ideally, a healthcare professional who also has additional training and experience and expertise, such as yourself in nutrition or nutritional biochemistry and nutritional sciences in general. But there are some designer stimulants that have made their way onto the marketplace that consumers should be aware of, because of course there can be some substantial interactions with, for example, psychotropic medications or antidepressants or antipsychotics and anti-anxiety medications. So there's some designer stimulants. I would also say there are also some ingredients that are not really dietary ingredients, but have made their way into dietary supplements as well. They're essentially drugs that are masquerading, or they're unapproved, misbranded drugs that are masquerading as dietary supplements. And these are some things like SARMs or certain hormonal modulators that could be used sometimes in certain circles of the dietary supplement space. But they tend not to be mass market. They tend not to have as much exposure. They're sort of trying to fly under the radar as well, and they may sell at very small specialty retail centers. I often end up getting asked, and I'm sure you do as well, right? What's the best supplement I should be on, right? And there really is no best for everyone, right? Because one size fits all means one size fits nobody, and there should be a degree of customization, if you will, to what an individual is looking for, depending on what their goals are. But I think generally I'll tell you, some supplements that I take, for example, that are non-negotiables. So I'm definitely on a high quality marine-based omega-3 fatty acid product. So an EPA, DHA, DPA supplement. I like Astaxanthin. I also am on magnesium. Usually a magnesium that's a chelated form of magnesium, either magnesium threonate or bisglycinate. I also do take some products that are higher in the curcuminoid polyphenol category. I also take, even though I take it for general health and wellness and longevity, I take creatine monohydrate, which I know may sound like a surprise, right? Because most people associate creatine with bodybuilders or sports nutrition, but there are some enormous general health and wellness side benefits to creatine. So I also take creatine, and then of course I do take NAD3, which I know we'll talk about a little later, as a longevity kind of super nutrient matrix. And I think those are sort of the non-negotiables. And then I rotate other ingredients that I guess you could consider more specialty type into my regimen. Yeah, so NAD3 is basically the product of our team, our IP discovery team, looking at longevity and looking at leveraging what we know are already health promoting activities. We know they're health span and lifespan promoting activities, many of which are very much in vogue, right? So things like thermal stress, sauna, cryotherapy, cold plunging, of course, exercise, and that could include both resistance training and cardiovascular conditioning and aerobic exercise, high, low, and medium intensity exercises, fasting or caloric restriction, The consumption of Mediterranean diet or polyphenol-rich foods that are not inadvertently inflammatory, because some of them can obviously cause issues in certain individuals. So all those behaviors, all those activities, what we set out to do is we said all those activities have not only is it the behavior, but that behavior is translating into a certain molecular or biochemical signature within the body, within cells. And so we said, what if we could look at the pattern of what genes, for example, are being turned on, or what switches are being flipped on, what switches or genes are being flipped off, in order to promote those health span and longevity benefits. And so that was one thing we did, is we took a look at that. The other thing that happened to us was, serendipitously, one of the ingredients that the NAD3 is focused on, we already had brought to market about 8 years ago. And we did a lot of preclinical animal safety work, mechanistic work, and then human clinical work, over 10 human clinical trials on an ingredient called theacrine. And one of the things that we ran into serendipitously was, this is an ingredient we mostly used as a nootropic, sort of brain health promoting ingredient, good for cognition, mood, focus, concentration, an alkaloid like caffeine, except without any of the blood pressure or hemodynamic, as we call it, blood pressure, heart rate issues that you can get with caffeine for cardiovascular stimulation. And one of the things we noticed was, we saw in an 8-week study, we saw a decrease in triglyceride levels and LDL levels, LDL cholesterol levels, in subjects who were taking 200 milligrams or 300 milligrams of this ingredient. And that was totally unexpected. We were only looking at it for safety in that cohort. And we said, something is going on here metabolically. It was a robust signal. It wasn't just, the p-value was really robust. So we knew something was happening. And then we started digging in a little further and doing some more animal work. And we discovered that one of them was also activating a pro-longevity compound or enzyme in the body known as sirtuin 3. And so we put those two pieces together, the fact that we wanted to look to a molecular signature of longevity, along with what we already knew about theacrine. And then finally, the third part to what allowed us to bring NAD3 to market was, we felt there was a big shortfall with the current approach of being so pro-NAD plus promoting, in terms of, well, you just throw more NAD precursor at the problem and you'll make more NAD plus, which I'm sure consumers and listeners have heard a lot about in the news when looking at anti-aging or longevity. And we thought that was sort of leaving a lot on the table in terms of what we could uncover for real longevity benefits. Yeah, so a couple of different lines of why it works. So first of all, let's take there was a study that we were involved in that we were co-authors and published with a group of colleagues of ours at Auburn University. Donald Lamb was the lead author. And basically what we did is we looked at the effect of strength training, middle-aged individuals who were average age 60 years old, took about 16 of those subjects, strength trained them for 10 weeks using whole body resistance training, just twice a week. And we did is they took muscle biopsies from the leg, from the vastus lateralis, the quadriceps muscle, and basically looked to compare it to a cohort, a comparator of young 22-year-olds, on average there were 16 22-year-olds that were already recreationally weight training and active. And what we saw is that the strength training actually caused the muscle to have a profile that was much more, after the 10 weeks, of course, not pre, but post, the muscle was much more reminiscent of and it mirrored the molecular profile of the young, healthy, recreationally trained individuals. And what we looked at was the levels of NAD, NAD+, we looked at NADH in the muscle cell, looked at an enzyme and a protein called NAMPT, which is one of the rate-limiting enzymes the body itself uses to make NAD+ from scratch, de novo. We also looked at the sirtuin levels, and those levels were also elevated after training. So before training, they were a lot lower, of course, in the middle-aged individuals. After training, it essentially more or less normalized or made them more youthful. And one of the things we did with NAD3 is we studied it in a muscle cell model first in vitro. We recently published that data in the journal Nutrients, actually published last month. And it basically showed that we were able to dramatically reduce something known as NLRP3 inflammasome, which is this big central hub that helps to drive inflammation. Chronic and severe inflammation is usually going to be accompanied by high levels of NLRP3 inflammasome. So we were able to dramatically drop that, and we saw increases in sirtuin levels, sirtuin 3, sirtuin 1, global sirtuin activity. So we mimicked with NAD3 the things that we saw in humans that happened with healthy resistance training over a 10-week period of time. And that's just one example of why we're excited about NAD3. We did about 5 preclinical studies first, and now we're in the middle of a big human trial with 3 different arms. We actually just finished the last subject a couple weeks ago, and so we're now analyzing all that data and getting ready to present it. And we're excited about what we're going to see in actual humans who took NAD3 every day for a 12-week period of time. We're looking at things like the epigenetic clock, reversing biological aging in humans. We're also looking to see what genes were turned on and off to see that it actually correlated with what we saw in the cells. And we're looking at various inflammatory markers, as well as the individual's ability to control their glycemic response and insulin response as well to foods. We started exploring and screening a library of dozens of different compounds that we thought could be important to amplify the effects of theacrine that we already had and we knew. And so we stumbled into the ingredient the matrix of 3 ingredients that make up NAD3, which really are the ones that turned on an enormous number of signals that all were sort of checking the boxes for longevity benefits, for helping with cellular resilience and improving your ability to handle environmental stressors as well as metabolic stressors endogenously. So we started looking at gene expression models in vitro, meaning in cells. And we started looking to see the effects of exposing these cells to the NAD3 matrix in various iterations until we landed on the one that was optimal and ideal. And that meant the right ratio of the ingredients as well as the right combination of ingredients. We then translated that into human work as well. And the nice thing about NAD3 is that the 3 ingredients that make it up, the constituents of it, which is theacrine. The second ingredient, the supernutrient, is a wasabi japonica extract. And wasabi japonica is part of the family of the brassica sort of cruciferous vegetable family, but it's even more potent in the concentration of these really powerful compounds that are known as isothiocyanates. It's one of the reasons that broccoli and broccoli sprouts, for example, with sulforaphane and glucoraphanin and glucosinolates, have received a lot of attention and praise recently as well for longevity benefits. But wasabi, we felt, was one of those under-recognized, underutilized botanicals, and sure enough, it lit up when combined with theacrine, and our third ingredient ended up being copper-1 cuprous niacinamate or nicotinate. Basically, it's a stabilized form of copper. Copper can exist in 2 different chemical forms based on the charge or the oxidation state. It can exist as copper-1. It can exist as copper-2. And your listeners might be able to identify when something patinas, when you have the copper And it patinas, it goes from the, brilliant copper color to sort of that greenish aquamarine, aqua blue, blue-green color. And that means it's been oxidized to copper 2 state. The body uses copper in its +1 state in all of the enzymatic reactions. So this combination is what makes up NAD3, and it synergistically increased many different important genes that we know are associated with all those activities we mentioned before that increase health span. Yeah, so we're actually expanding the preliminary work we've done because it's still early days, and as you know, all scientists will always say more work needs to be done, right? It's never over. There's more derivative stuff coming. What we're doing now is combining NAD3 with other ingredients. So we're looking at some, the synergy on top of synergy. What happens when you combine it, for example, with polyphenols that are found in olive oil or extra virgin high quality olive oil. We're looking at what happens when you combine it with rosemary extract or things like coffee fruit or coffee berry extract. And we're finding some fascinating things on the preclinical side, and now we're going to want to move that into the clinical realm. And one other thing I'll mention here, Dr. Gundry, is that unlike many ingredients that are touted for longevity on the market, this one has one other unique aspect to it, and that's that it's experiential and it's something you can feel. When you consume the product NAD3, for example, every morning with your coffee or your tea, it definitely will give you a little bit of a neurotropic lift. It'll give your mood or your affect a little bit of a lift, and you'll feel sharper. And we have that data. That's not just anecdotal data. We have that's borne itself out in more than 10 human clinical trials we've conducted on one of the components, theacrine, within it. So it's something that we know is working on a molecular level, and it's something you can feel, right? Which is sort of a bonus, and we're excited about that. Look, what we're trying to do here is just amplify the healthy behaviors that we already know work, and that's really what we set out to do. So we don't want to replace healthy behaviors. We don't want to replace your calorie restriction, your healthy Mediterranean diets, your meditation, your social connections, all the things that we know work with the blue zones and the individuals that are super centenarians, the exercise obviously being one of them. We just want to basically supplement and amplify all those behaviors and all those activities. So NAD plus is one of the most life-sustaining, important coenzymes in the body, in every cell. So I don't want to underplay or underrepresent how important it is. It's incredibly important for being able to transfer electrons through most chemical reactions in the body. But most intriguingly, it's also a substrate or a fuel to drive this complex of enzymes known as sirtuins. And without NAD, you don't get sirtuins working the way they should. So you do need a good, healthy pool or status of NAD plus in order to run your life and live your life to the maximum, right? So anything from energy to metabolism to immune function, you name it, health and human performance, you do need NAD plus. And it's actually derived from vitamin B3, essentially. But the body can make it from amino acids itself. And we, of course, consume precursors to NAD plus in the form of vitamin B precursors or equivalents, niacin equivalents, which is vitamin B3. So that's my, I guess, nutshell explanation for NAD plus.